The dance floor was still empty when Jordan Brooks noticed something was off. The reception hall at Lakeshore Manor glowed with warm lights and soft gold accents. Crystal glasses clinked gently as guests found their seats. The air buzzed with that particular kind of joy that only comes from a wedding day finally exhaling after months of planning. Jordan stood near the head table, one arm around his new wife, Naomi Brooks. Naomi, black, late 20s, elegant and radiant in a satin gown she'd chosen after weeks of debate, rested her head briefly against Jordan's shoulder. The ceremony had gone perfectly. The vows were still ringing in their ears. Everything, so far, had been exactly what they'd envisioned, especially the music. Jordan had been clear about that from the beginning. They hadn't wanted the typical wedding playlist, no generic pop, no last-minute crowd pleasers that erased who they were. Their reception was supposed to sound like them, R&B, neo-soul, Afrobeats, a little old-school hip-hop mixed in with family favourites. They'd put it all in writing, every song, every transition, every do not play note. Jordan glanced toward the DJ booth. Mark Reynolds, the DJ, stood behind his setup in a crisp black shirt, headphones resting around his neck. White, early 40s, confident in the way men often were when they believed experience outweighed instructions. He caught Jordan's eye and gave a thumbs up. Jordan nodded back, though something in his stomach tightened. The first dance ended to applause. Naomi smiled, glowing, as guests wiped their eyes and raised their glasses. Then the DJ took the mic. "All right, ladies and gentlemen," Mark said, voice smooth and practiced, "let's get this party started." The beat dropped. It wasn't on the playlist. Jordan knew immediately. The song blasting through the speakers was upbeat, loud, aggressively cheerful. Top 40 pop with a 4 on the floor beat that belonged at a corporate holiday party, not here. Jordan looked at Naomi. Her smile faltered, just slightly. "This isn't it," she whispered. Jordan nodded. "No, it's not." A few guests hesitated near the dance floor, unsure whether to start moving or sit back down. Naomi's aunt leaned toward her cousin and frowned. A couple of Jordan's friends exchanged looks. Mark leaned into the mic again. "Let's get some energy in here." Jordan took a breath and walked toward the DJ booth. He kept his tone polite, controlled. "Hey Mark," Jordan said, leaning in so the mic wouldn't catch it. "That song's not on the approved list." Mark barely glanced at him. "Yeah, I know." Jordan blinked. "Then why is it playing?" Mark smiled like he was indulging a nervous groom. "Trust me, I'm just fixing the vibe. Gotta warm people up." Jordan felt heat creep into his chest. "We talked about this. We don't want pop." Mark waved a hand dismissively. "Man, nobody dances to slow R&B at the start. You want people on the floor, right?" Jordan looked back at Naomi. She stood frozen near the table, bouquet set down, eyes following the exchange. Her joy from minutes earlier had dimmed into something tighter, more careful. Jordan turned back to Mark. "We want the playlist we agreed on." Mark chuckled softly. "You'll thank me later." The song continued. Louder now. Jordan noticed a few guests starting to dance, not because they loved it, but because weddings trained people to follow the DJ. Naomi's cousin shrugged and stepped onto the floor, uncertain. Naomi swallowed hard. "This is our wedding," she said quietly, stepping closer. "Please change the song." Mark sighed exaggeratedly, pulling one headphone halfway over his ear. "Look, I've done hundreds of weddings. I know what works." Jordan's jaw tightened. "We hired you to play our music." Mark leaned back, arms crossed. "And I'm doing my job." The beat kept pounding. Jordan felt something shift. Not anger yet, but recognition. They weren't being ignored by accident. They were being overridden. Jordan reached into his suit jacket and felt the edge of folded paper. The contract. He hadn't planned to pull it out tonight. But as Mark nodded along to the wrong song, convinced he knew better than the couple standing in front of him, Jordan realized something important. If the DJ was willing to fix the vibe by erasing them, Then the night was already heading somewhere it wasn't supposed to go, and the only thing that could stop it was written in ink. Jordan didn't raise his voice. That was the part Mark seemed to expect, the emotional groom, flustered, overreacting, easy to brush off. Instead, Jordan stood still, shoulders squared, eyes steady. "Turn it off," he said quietly. Mark laughed under his breath, still bobbing his head to the beat. "Relax. Give it one song." Naomi's hands clenched at her sides. She looked out at the room, the guests, the tables they'd spent weeks arranging, the family members who'd flown in from different states. This moment was supposed to feel like celebration. Instead, it felt like something was being taken out of her hands in real time. "We were very clear," she said, her voice calm but strained. "This music matters to us." Mark finally looked at her directly. His expression shifted, not apologetic, not respectful, amused. "I get it," he said, "but you've got to read the room. People want something familiar." Naomi stared at him. "This is familiar. To us." Mark shook his head. "Not to everyone." Jordan felt that sentence land like a weight. Not to everyone. As if this wedding, their wedding, was a performance that needed to be adjusted for someone else's comfort. Jordan glanced around again. He noticed who was dancing now and who wasn't. Naomi's side of the family stayed seated, watching, smiling politely but stiffly. His uncle leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, clearly unimpressed. The joy in the room had fractured into pockets of obligation. Jordan turned back to the booth. "Mark, change the song, now." Mark leaned forward, lowering his voice. "If I switch to that slow stuff, the floor's gonna die. You don't want that energy." Naomi took a sharp breath. "This is our energy." Mark sighed dramatically and reached toward the laptop, but instead of changing the track, he turned the volume down slightly and queued up another pop song, even louder, even more upbeat. "There," he said. "Compromise." Jordan's chest tightened. That was it. He reached into his jacket and pulled out the folded contract, smoothing it out on the edge of the DJ table. His hands were steady now, focused. "You see this?" Jordan said. "This is the agreement you signed." Mark rolled his eyes. "Come on, man, you're really pulling paperwork at your own wedding." "Yes," Jordan replied, "because you're not listening." Naomi stepped closer, her voice firm. "Page 4, music selection clause." Mark glanced down briefly, dismissively. "Those are guidelines." Jordan flipped the page and tapped a paragraph with his finger. "No, this is a condition." Mark leaned in, reading now despite himself. DJ agrees to play only the music selected and approved by the couple. Any deviation requires express consent from the couple. Failure to comply may result in immediate termination of services without payment. Mark scoffed. "That's boilerplate. Nobody enforces that." Jordan met his eyes. "We are." The room around them felt suddenly very quiet, even though the music was still playing. A few guests nearby had stopped dancing. Naomi's maid of honor stood up from her chair, watching closely. Someone near the bar whispered, "What's going on?" Mark straightened. "You're overreacting." Jordan shook his head slowly. "You changed our playlist to fix the vibe. That's not your call." Naomi added, her voice unwavering now, "This night stops if you don't respect what we agreed to." For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Mark's face. Because this wasn't about taste anymore. It was about control. And standing in front of him was a couple who had decided, together, that their wedding would not be edited by someone who thought he knew better. The song played on for a few more seconds. Then Jordan reached out and pressed the power button on the DJ's mixer. The music cut off completely. The room fell into stunned silence. And in that silence, the contract finally had the floor. The silence was immediate and absolute. For half a second, no one moved. The abrupt absence of sound felt louder than the music had been. Guests froze mid-step, hands still raised, conversations cutting off in awkward fragments. A fork clinked against a plate somewhere near the back of the room. Mark stared at the darkened mixer like it had betrayed him. "You can't do that," he said, his voice suddenly sharp without the buffer of music. Jordan didn't step back. I just did. Naomi stood beside him now, close enough that their shoulders touched. Her pulse was loud in her ears, but her posture was steady. She scanned the room and saw what she hadn't noticed before. How many people were watching them, really watching, waiting to see who would flinch. Mark reached for the power switch again. Jordan placed his hand over it. Firm. Not aggressive. Final. We're not continuing until this is resolved, Jordan said. According to the contract. Mark let out a laugh that came out thin. This is insane. You're killing your own reception. Naomi shook her head. You did that when you ignored us. A murmur rippled through the guests now. Not confusion, recognition. Naomi's mother stood up from her table, lips pressed together. Jordan's sister crossed her arms, eyes locked on the booth. Mark glanced around, realizing the room was no longer on his side. This is supposed to be a celebration, he said. You're making it uncomfortable. Jordan nodded. It became uncomfortable when our culture was treated like a problem that needed fixing. That landed. Mark's jaw tightened. I never said anything about culture. You didn't have to, Naomi replied. You just replaced it. The words hung there, undeniable. Mark took a step back, palms up. Fine. You want your slow stuff? Go ahead. Don't blame me when nobody dances. Jordan folded the contract once and slid it back into his jacket. We won't. He turned toward the room. Hey, he said, voice carrying without a microphone. We're going to reset for a minute. Naomi stepped forward, lifting her chin. Thank you for your patience. This night is about us, and we want it to sound like us. For a beat, no one responded. Then Naomi's aunt clapped, once, loud, someone else followed, then another. The tension broke, not into chaos, but into something warm and affirming. Guests nodded, smiled. A few laughed softly in relief. Mark stood there, expression unreadable now. Jordan turned back to him. You can either follow the contract and play the approved playlist, or we end services here. Mark swallowed. You're serious. Naomi didn't hesitate. Completely. The DJ booth felt smaller suddenly, the authority Mark usually carried slipping under the weight of witnesses and written terms. He looked down at his laptop, then back at them. Fine, he said finally. Your playlist. Jordan stepped back and removed his hand. Mark powered the system back on. The speakers hummed quietly as he cued the next track. The opening notes of a smooth R&B song filled the hall, one Naomi and Jordan had chosen together months ago, dancing in their living room while finalizing the list. Naomi's shoulders dropped as the sound washed over her. Jordan exhaled, long and slow. Within seconds, Naomi's cousins were on the floor. Her uncle followed, grinning. Jordan's friends joined in, the energy shifting, not louder, but deeper, more grounded. This time, the dancing wasn't polite, it was real. Mark watched from behind the booth, expression tight as the floor filled, not despite the playlist, but because of it. Jordan took Naomi's hand and pulled her gently toward the crowd. As they stepped onto the floor together, Naomi leaned in and whispered, "Thank you for stopping it." Jordan squeezed her hand. "Thank you for standing with me." And as the music swelled, their music, the reception found its rhythm again. Not fixed, claimed. The rest of the night unfolded the way it was always meant to. Once the playlist shifted back to what Jordan and Naomi had chosen, the room changed almost instantly. Not louder, truer. Conversations loosened. Laughter came easier. The dance floor didn't just fill, it settled, like everyone finally understood where they were and whose celebration this was. Naomi danced with her mother first, both of them laughing through tears as a song her parents used to play on Saturday mornings came through the speakers. Jordan watched from a few feet away, chest tight in the best way, realizing how close they'd come to losing this moment without even noticing. Mark stayed behind the booth, quieter now. He didn't speak into the mic again unless asked. He didn't add suggestions. He didn't try to steer the night. For the rest of the reception, he did exactly what the contract said, and nothing more. No one missed his commentary. Halfway through the night, Jordan's best man clinked a glass and made a toast that had people doubled over laughing. Naomi's grandmother joined the dance floor, shoes kicked off, moving slowly but proudly. The room wasn't performing happiness anymore, it was living in it. At one point, Naomi leaned her head against Jordan's chest, the music vibrating through both of them. "I didn't realize how close I was to letting that go," she said softly. Jordan rested his chin on her hair. "They count on that," he replied, "on you not wanting to make a scene." Naomi looked up at him. "You didn't make one." Jordan smiled faintly. "I stopped one." Later, as dessert was served and the lights dimmed, Mark approached them cautiously. His confidence was gone now, replaced with something flatter, more careful. "I finished the night as requested," he said. "I'll send the invoice reflecting the contract terms." Jordan nodded. "That's fine." Mark hesitated. "I was just trying to help." Naomi met his eyes. "Helping starts with listening." Mark didn't argue. He didn't apologize either. He simply nodded once and walked away. And that was enough. When the night finally wound down and the last song faded out, an old-school track that had everyone swaying arm in arm, Jordan and Naomi stood in the center of the floor, surrounded by people who loved them, music still echoing in their bones. As guests filtered out, more than one person stopped them to say the same thing. "This felt like you. Best reception I've been to in years. Thank you for standing your ground." Naomi smiled every time, but she knew the truth. They hadn't stood their ground to impress anyone. They'd done it to protect something small but essential, the right to define their own joy. Later that night, alone in their hotel room, shoes kicked off, Naomi curled up beside Jordan and laughed softly. "Can you believe we almost let someone rewrite our wedding?" Jordan shook his head. "I can believe someone tried." He reached for her hand. "I'm glad we didn't let the night keep going wrong just to avoid discomfort." Naomi squeezed his fingers. "Me too." Because the contract hadn't stopped the party, it had stopped the erasure, and in doing so, it gave the night back to the people it belonged to. Two people who knew exactly what they wanted their love to sound like and weren't willing to let anyone else fix it for them.